Do you want to create something fun and unique for Valentine's this year? Hello and welcome. I'm Elisa of Elisa Laporte Art, and today we are going to create our own cards and bookmarks for Valentine's Day. Yay! To do these cards, you won't need any fancy watercolors or paper. You can just use the Canson or Strathmore watercolor paper and some prangs if you want. This is just to have some fun and create some really fun and simple cards, as well as some bookmarks for you book readers out there. And if you want to show some extra love, you can subscribe and click that bell. It really helps me out. The first thing I would like to start with is this pink color. Now it's a quinacridone rose, and I think it's the perfect color of pink for these flamingos. And this one's right here. I'm going to wet my paper in the areas that I want to paint this pink, nowhere else, and I really want this fluid feel to it. So I'll get it wet, and then I'm going to let it dry just a minute or two, and then I'm going to add that quinacridone rose to my painting. And when I paint just or add water just in that area that I want to paint, it'll stay in where it's wet. It won't go outside of that. So I'm just going to touch little places here and there where I want it to be pink, and I'm just going to let it blend out so that it allows it to be very fluid looking. It's not going to cover every little part of the flamingo because I really want some white in that flamingo. And then I'm going to take some out if I feel like there's too much or it's too dark, and I just take a semi-damp brush and I'm just going to pull that out. And here I'm going to do the beak. I'm going to do it kind of a flesh color, and then the base of that beak is black. So I'm going to start off with a red and a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to mix it together so it creates kind of a fleshy orange. So you want it just a little bit more pink than you do orange. You can see that here, and I'm going to add that to my beak. And then for my blacks, you can either use a Payne's Gray or an Ivory Black. I like to mix my own, which I'll leave a link in the description of this video where I mix my own blacks so you can see how to do that. And then I'm just going to quickly add the edges of that black to the beak. This is a very loose painting. You don't need to get too detailed with it. And then I'm going to use my metallics from my last video, this one here. I'll also leave a link to that one below. And I'm using that metallic rose gold, in those legs. I'm going to come back in with my quinacridone rose and darken up those areas now that it's dried a bit. And I'm going to darken up the neck and even in the wings, still using some water. Here I'm just putting in water and then touching in again where I want those really dark spots to be. I'm going to use a higher concentration of paint with my water. So I'm just adding more pigment to that mixture that I already have, and it'll darken everything up. So I'm just going to go into this other flamingo and create those darks. Values are very important. It really helps make your flamingo just pop out and look more real. Those values are very important. And I'm going to just touch a little bit of that black into those legs at the base, and then go in and define a little bit more of the beak using the black. Okay, I'm going to wet the background, and I'm going to just put a very pale cerulean blue in those spots. Just doing wet on wet again, and if my pink bleeds a little bit into my background, that's okay. I really want that loose effect. So I'm going to just touch the cerulean blue in to my background, so it just has this very light feel, and you don't have to get everything. See how my brush, it's not completely dripping with paint, but it's got some paint in there, and then you can just flick that on there and it will create those spots all over it. And I'm going to do that with this purple as well. I believe it's a diazonine purple or diazonine violet. And I'm just going to put some of that purple. You can touch up and pull some of that out if it gets on the flamingo where you don't want it to. And once it's dry, I'm actually going to cover up a part of the head and add more paint splatters to it, but I don't want to ruin the actual flamingos, so just flick that paint on there and allow yourself to have some fun with this. This is fun, and we should just allow ourselves to be free and create the piece that you want. I love how this turned out. I think it's a beautiful piece. It'll make a beautiful Valentine's card. You can write "Be Mine" on it if you want. Right now I'm going to go over it with some pen once it's completely dried, and I'm going to just add some line work to it. You can if you want to, you don't have to, but I think this one will be more fun with some line work, just to define the facial features and those wings a little bit more. I think line work in some instances can really take a painting to that next level. Not in every painting, but because I don't like to be reliant on line work alone. I like my paintings to be able to stand on their own, but for fun little paintings like this, or for like maybe urban sketching, it's really fun to add that line to your drawings, because pen and ink is really a fun medium, if you ask me. And here I'm going to take the tape off, and I'm going to finish this card. You can sign it down there at the bottom or inside the card if you want. You can add this heart and say "Be My Valentine," whatever you would like to do for your card. I'm going to start going in wet on wet, creating some poppies. I'm going to define where I want my grass and the stems, where I want my flowers to be. You can take your damp brush and pull away any excess paint that's bled into areas you don't want and remove that. And I'm just playing with some CAD red light and a little bit of that quinacridone rose and creating these poppies and just kind of putting them everywhere and letting them bleed out. This will kind of be a guide for where I want my flowers to be, where I want the greenery and the grass. And it'll also serve as a background and a backdrop to maybe those lighter colors, like you have more foliage in the background. And as it starts to dry, I'm going to add more paint to my washes and make it more concentrated and continue to layer the color and darken it up. I don't want to go too much because I don't want to create a mess. So I'm just waiting for it to dry and adding a little bit more as it dries and as I add more paint, because I still want it to bleed and be very soft. Then I'm going to go in with a higher concentration, of course, just really touch in and define those poppies that I want in the foreground, and then the rest will kind of be in the background so you see them, but they're not fully there. I'm going to take some of my black and add it to the center and just let it bleed into that, and it creates a really nice effect, making darker stems and lines with higher concentration of paint. I'm just going to continue to layer and be watching how quickly your paper is drying and how thick your paint is. As it's drying, you want to have a thicker paint because your paper is more dry, so you want to thicken it up as you go, and it will change the way your paint lays, and it's not going to create those blossoms. It'll actually layer on top of it because of the weight of and the concentration of your paint. Here I've let it dry completely, and I'm going to go in and define a little bit more where I want those stems, the main stems of my flowers that I want up front, and just create some stems that are, closer to your view. Just add some more water and brush in some different colors of green. I'm using a sap green, and then I'm also adding just a touch of cad red, very, very tiny, to make it less green and vibrant. It kind of dulls it down a little bit more. And I'm just going to create that front area and let it dry. And then again, I'm going to go in with my Sennelier fine liner pens, and I'm going to do some line work in defining a little bit more where these flowers are. And I'm going to be fairly loose with my pen, and I don't want to just follow the line of the flowers. I just, be very loose with that and showing maybe where the flower is, and it doesn't have to be right within everything. I have some white in there, and it's beautiful, and it adds the highlights that I want. I want these flowers to be a little bit more abstract. I don't want them to be, photorealistic. I just want to have fun with this. It's a fun little Valentine card, and you can go back in after I've added the pen lines. I'm going to add a little bit more paint and bleed it out a little bit more where I want it to go, and it'll push those other poppies back a little bit further. I'll probably darken up the center in the black a little bit more. I want to allow that to kind of bleed a little bit, but not too much. And just have fun with your painting. Just remember that this is, for fun. It's for learning to be more free with your paintings, to be more loose. I tend to be a little bit more detailed in my paintings, and I'm really trying to break free from that and become a little bit more loose in my painting. And this is a great exercise to do that. I mean, it's for a card, so a lot of times we don't think of it as the same way we would a painting. And I need to remember this a little bit more when I'm actually doing my paintings, to just be a little bit more representational and have some abstractness to it, that it doesn't have to define every line. And here I'm just going in and adding a little bit more depth and a little bit more value to my painting. I'm adding some negative space into my greenery, so it just really pushes that greenery back a little bit further. In some places you have those shadows within there because the sun will create shadows. And then if you notice all that greenery, it's focused upwards, so it's going to push your eye up to those flowers, and the flowers will really keep you in there. They're not going to be pushing you off the page. And I'm going to sign this in the corner. You don't have to sign it where it's a card. You can even sign it on the back if you would like. And we'll take off the tape. I believe I'm going to add a little bit of metallics. If I do, it'll probably be the copper or the bronze, just because it'll have a little bit of that redness to it, and it can add a little bit of sparkle, being this is for Valentine's. You don't have to add that, but you can. It makes it a lot of fun, and your card is ready to go. Now we're going to start in on our galaxy. These are going to be bookmarks, and I use this Canson watercolor paper, and I'm going to wet my entire paper, and we're going to go in wet on wet again, and we're going to choose a few colors that we really want to represent this, galaxy. I'm going to choose this Hooker's Green, and I'm going to use phthalo turquoise and a little bit of cad yellow. And I'm just going to go in a few places, and again, just defining where I want this galaxy to be. I want to leave some whites. You can see I have a lot of whites here because I am going to add my blacks, but just remember to leave some areas of white. We do this wet on wet so it really bleeds and I get those soft edges. It'll lighten up as it dries. And just remember that your paint will lighten up as it dries. So this will take a couple of layers, and I'm going to go in here because I need so much black. I'm actually going to take my Payne's Gray and just add some ultramarine blue and a tiny bit of my cad red just to give that black some life. I just feel like when it's just the Payne's Gray, it's a little dull and a little off, so I really like the vibrancy that blue and red give the black. I've let it dry, and now we're going to go in with our second layer, and we're going to actually do this wet on dry. So I'm going to go in with my paint, and I'm just going to be mixing, going into my Hooker's Green, then going into some yellow, then going into my phthalo turquoise, and kind of pulling everything together and darkening the areas, making sure I keep those whites, and just doing section by section. You don't want to try and tackle the whole thing or you're going to have way too many hard edges, so just focus on one area. Make sure you have those soft edges, using a damp, clean brush to smooth them out. And then you can always go back over it and go into some of those areas and darken them up. But if you go too dark too quickly and you get those hard lines, those are going to be there and you're not going to be able to get rid of them. So you're just going to continue, and I just work my way around the painting, adding the color I want, and then going in and adding the black, letting it bleed together and create those nebulas, which are so cool and define those galaxies so well. So it's just a matter of layering and pacing yourself. Make sure you only do about 2 or 3 colors. I wouldn't do more than that. Otherwise it gets overwhelming and you're trying to keep up with everything. Here I'm going in with a little bit thicker paint as it's dried and adding some of that yellow because it was bleeding out too much before. So as it dried, I kind of added a little bit. I didn't wait till it was completely dry, but when it was starting to be a little bit more dry, I added that yellow, and it really popped out that yellow in that part of my galaxy. And just back and forth. So you want large puddles, thick puddles. Make sure you have a larger concentration of pigment and paint than you do water at this point. You want to have them be the consistency of cream. If you think about how thick cream is, or how thick even milk is, that's the consistency we are going for here. And the first consistency was more like tea, if you think of that. And so you want to think of your paints in consistencies of tea and coffee and milk and cream, just because of how thick they are in comparison to the water. I'm just going to keep going until I really, don't noodle with it too much. Once you've got it finished, then you want to put your brushes down and let it dry. Now that it's dry, we're going to take some white gouache, and I'm going to load my brush. You don't want it to be dripping wet, but you don't want it to be too thick either. So you want it just so it has like a bead on the end of your paint there. See how thick that is? That's great. And then I'm just going to hit it against my finger, and you want to go in different directions because your paint will splatter in the direction that you're flicking your paint. So I'm just going to make sure I hit in those black areas especially. That's where I'm going to see those stars the most. So I really want to make sure I have more stars in those areas. Go back into your paint if you need a little bit more, and just create all those stars. They will lighten up just a tad after they dry. And that's okay because some will look closer than others. And what you can do if they do dry and some of them look a little bit too light, you can go in with a Jelly Roll white pen and just kind of go over top of some of those stars that you already have and darken up. So some look closer and some will look further away. I don't like to go in with just my pen because that would take forever, and then your splatters or your stars will look a little too uniform. So doing it the splatter way, it just is quick and easy, and then you can just touch up with your pen later. And now that I'm done with that, it's all dry, we're going to take the tape off, and I'm going to cut these down into bookmarks. And it's going to look great for our class, or you can even have it for yourself. But this works great for my girls for school when I need, 20 Valentine cards. I can just cut them down into little bookmarks, and you can put little sayings with them, something maybe to do with Star Wars or something to do with reading, or you can just leave it as it is, have them write their name in pencil on the back so the kids can erase your child's name and maybe put their own name on it. I always put it on the back just so it's not in pen on the front. And then you have these really cool looking bookmarks, and you can even punch a hole in them and add a tassel if you want, or some ribbon. I'm gonna just staple a little candy treat to go with it that they can give for their Valentine cards. And it's great because then they get a little bookmark and it's not just a card, and it's really fun and exciting, and your kids can help you do this, so it's fun for them and it's fun for you and it's less stress. You don't have to really buy and spend a lot of money on this, and I think you guys will all enjoy doing this together. You can even place little hearts on them if you want. But I thought this would be fun to share with you guys, and fun for you and your kids, or even just you to do. I hope you guys had so much fun creating your cards and bookmarks just like I did. And if you would like to see more tutorials like this, I will leave a link in the description below. Question of the day: what did you enjoy drawing when you were a kid? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and to click that bell so you will receive a notification when I upload new videos. And I will see you in the next one.